And I tend to be a pretty black and white thinker. That is just who I am. I'm sure that has frustrated some people in my life, but that is just how it is. I do think it's getting better, but we still are in a place where a lot of people think if you disagree with me, then you must hate me. And I think that is crazy. It's been very wild to live in that world for a long time. The product they're selling is division. They're selling division, distrust for your neighbor, disgust for your neighbor. Okay. They don't want us to be disgusted at the elites who are running this place. They want us to be disgusted with someone who is basically in our exact same life situation, but just thinks differently than we do. My point is that information filters down to us by official channels and is highly, highly processed and propagandized and sanitized to serve an agenda of keeping us in these tiny little boxes of knowledge. So we are all on the same side, and we can all ignore all of this fake propaganda that comes out all the time for every issue, and we can focus on the principles that are going to benefit all of us as we continue to resist the imminent digital mass surveillance totalitarian robot state that's coming. I remember getting very into politics my first year of college. I had a long commute and I had to go every day because college freshmen have terrible schedules. So I was listening to talk radio all the time. And I remember feeling very empowered to have this access to this new perspective on the world that I had not had before. And it really became a passion for me, so much so that I made it my major 2 years later for my first 4 years of college. I made political science my major. When I was a senior, I changed it to art education, but it's neither here nor there. Anyway, I had a lot of opinions about things. And since I can remember having opinions, I have always had conservative values, believed in what we were taught in school. Definitely free speech, free exercise of religion, free markets, all those things worth protecting, worth conserving, thus conservative politics, right? Isn't that what it's supposed to be? Anyway, my favorite thing was the justice system. I just felt so blessed to be in a country where there was equal justice for all, right? Everybody is under the same law and subject to the same penalties and punishments as anyone else, no matter what, no matter how rich you are, if you're a celebrity, if you're whatever. It doesn't matter. Isn't that what civil rights was all about? Wasn't that the whole thing? No matter who you are, we're all treated equally, okay? I believe that the family is the building block of society. Very important to protect the family, children, the family structure, incentivize building families, not make it hard for people to do that. Doing everything we can do to properly educate kids. Don't we want our kids to grow up and be creative and innovative and critically think about things so that they can make the types of good decisions that are going to keep this great society we have running and be able to be the ones that will take over and make these big decisions that will affect the world in the future, right? Isn't that what we want? Is that what we get from the giant education system we have now? It's debatable, okay? But those were the things that I believed in. And I tend to be a pretty black and white thinker. That is just who I am. I am sure that has frustrated some people in my life, but that is just how it is. I believe in right and wrong. I believe in good and evil. I have learned over the years that nuance and gray areas are also very important. I have really learned that, everybody has their own journeys to the truth. I think it's the most important thing that you're searching for truth, honestly, because I feel like if you're searching for it, you'll get there. But everybody's on a different timeline, so I've become personally a lot more forgiving than I used to be, which I think is a good thing. But in the arena of politics, I've become way more forgiving of regular people and way less forgiving of the politicians and these powerful people who are in this elite class, right? Become a little less forgiving of them the more that I find out. I can get pretty passionate about things that I think are wrong and especially harmful to people or our culture as a whole. I also tend to be fairly vocal, if you haven't guessed that. Yeah. I've been in a Facebook fight or two, okay? I have cut my teeth on Facebook comment fights. Anyway, I learned a lot there too. But anymore, that kind of stuff just doesn't really feel worth it to me because everything is so emotional and so divisive. And I'm like, why even bother? I mean, I can think of a few instances where someone kind of told me, behind the scenes, they were like, hey, you really changed my mind on that, or you really helped me see this way. I mean, very, very rare. It has happened, but it was rare. I've had more people say, hey, I'm really glad you speak out like that. Keep doing it, and I'm like, why don't you help me? Why don't you back me up? But okay, whatever, I will, because I just can't help it, because that's who I am. Everything is so emotionally divisive, and that is by design. Like, they did that on purpose. I can remember when I noticed that everything was getting super politically correct. And I thought, well, that's not good because, hey, we're supposed to have free speech, right? The idea is you can say what you want to say. And the people who hear what you say either decide if they like it or they don't. So they continue to interact with you or listen to you or whatever, or they don't. And that is their free choice to make. But if we're being politically correct, we're stopping the speech before it happens out of fear, out of punishment, all of these things. And then making it a law in some places. Florida, Ron DeSantis, huge disappointment there. Anyway, since everything has become politically correct and we have had the forces above us pushing these huge divides for years and years, now it's to the point, and it has been for a long time, and I do think it's getting better, but we still are in a place where a lot of people think if you disagree with me, then you must hate me. And I think that is crazy. And it's been very, very wild to live in that world for a long time. I don't hate anyone. I don't wish anything bad on my enemies. I don't have enemies, but I don't wish anything bad on anybody. Even people who I think are horrible human beings, I still want them to repent and to come to Jesus and be forgiven and be living in the grace of God so that they can improve people's lives around them instead of ruining them, and have their soul saved themselves. That's what I want. I am a Christian. That's what I want. I don't wish bad things to happen to anybody, even people who hate me for whatever reason or think that I hate them. I don't have those feelings about people. So living in that space and witnessing all of the accusations of hatred from people has been more than I can take. I can't stand it. So I don't even like to use the word hate because it's so overused and it's very annoying to me. And I'm going to say it. I just said I don't want to say hate, but I really do hate. I hate that when you're trying to speak on anything, on any topics, that you always feel now that you have to have a disclaimer in the beginning. If you want to talk about a person who committed a crime or anything, like if they're in some socially protected class, then you have to start your thing with, well, I don't hate this group of people, but, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I assume the best from you. I assume the best from anybody that I'm talking to. I'm not going to assume that you are a racist bigot who hates people. So I don't want you to assume that about me, and I don't want to feel like I need to clarify that I'm not a terrible person before I have a conversation with you. So I do hate that. That's something that I hate. Anyway, I also don't think that people avoid these conversations anymore just to avoid frustration and like uncomfortableness with people in their lives. I think that people aren't wanting to talk about these things because we feel hopeless. Do you feel like you can make any real changes by having an uncomfortable conversation with anyone in your life? Because I don't. So I'm like, why would we even mess with it when we could literally talk about anything else, right? That's my thought. at this point. Because all of us have been hoodwinked time and time and time and time and time and time and time again by gutless, deceitful politicians who have abandoned us, utterly abandoned us too many times when we actually thought they would help us. The common people, like regular people, thought they would help us avoid this relentless march towards total control over our society, towards globalization and one world government, the digitization of our lives, the poisoning of all of our resources, our air and water and food, and pharma companies targeting everyone with whatever new poisons they have, trying to mandate it for everybody to take. And we are tired, and we don't want to ruin relationships we have with people we love over these demons. Why would I go to bat for anybody at this point? Why would I go to the trouble to have an uncomfortable political conversation with somebody that I love so that I can convince them to vote for someone who is inevitably going to sell them down the river? This really, really hurts to say. Like, it's painful, but I don't know if I'm going to vote anymore. And I never thought I would say that. I was a political science major. I believed what I was taught in the 90s, that we live in such a fair society where everybody's vote counts. Okay. But I don't know if I can do it. I had so much faith. I had so much hope in Trump's second term. The first term, I was kind of checked out of politics at the time, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. You know, obviously the headlines dominate always, especially with all the impeachments and everything. But I kind of was checked out. And honestly, the whole time he was being elected, I was waiting for him to come out and say, like, I was kidding. Like, I just thought it was nuts that he was even running in the first place. But anyway, then after he lost the second election, I honestly believed that it was stolen. And I think I still believe that. There were too many shenanigans to ignore, but everybody ignores them. So that makes me think there really is something to see and nobody wants to look at it. So anyway, that's that. And then after but the Biden administration and after COVID, all the social chaos, the worst year of my life living through COVID, I was counting down to Trump's second election because I thought for sure he's saying all these things that I'm like, yes, we need that so badly. And things that are very important to me because of my kids, because of them being in school. He had a lot of big things on the list that he was promising. And I'm like, great. And he's talking about an American golden age, right? And yeah, don't we all want that? Okay. He said he was going to keep us out of the war. Done. That's what I wanted. I want to stop fighting all of these wars. Anyway, I stayed up late on election night, very hopeful. I watched Charlie Kirk's coverage of it, and I remember tearing up when he did after Charlie figured out that Trump had won. And I was just so relieved that had happened. And I thought, man, I can't wait to see where we are a year from now. Well, here we are. And I mean, I could not be more disappointed. This and watching the Charlie Kirk investigation go how it has gone just completely shattered any faith I had in this process. I would compare it to my faith being shattered in our healthcare system during COVID, which was catastrophic failure in my mind. Not failure. I mean, intentional failure. Yes. We won't go there today. But anyway, this is the same thing in my mind. I am just completely disgusted. And the people who supported Trump took some crap. we took some crap from people for just in our real lives, while we were saying, hey, if you don't want to go to war anymore, if you want the economy to be better, you want your groceries and your gas to be cheaper, and you want to start taking care of people here and not all the people all around the world and spending millions and millions of dollars on utter ridiculous BS stuff like can dolphins use cocaine or something like that? We took some crap just for going to bat for him socially and saying these things. And a lot of times, I mean, we were accused of being in a cult, and I'm not in a cult. And I voted for principles and not a man. Obviously, everybody knows he's not perfect, okay? Which nobody in politics is. And it's very obvious that he's not perfect. But if I'm looking at the choice between him and Kamala, I mean, what are we talking about? She was a disaster. But I voted for principles and not a man. I will not be following Trump loyally into hell as he abandons every principle that he ran on. The only thing he's taken care of since he came into office for real has been the border, which I would not be surprised if we found out that the invasion that Biden started, people act like, well, he should have closed the border too. Well, he opened it. He is the one who opened it. Our memories are so short. The border was not wide open before Biden came into office. He did that. So, is this a bigger plan that spans, multiple administrations where somehow some reason they wanted Trump to get back in, and so they're going to give, they want all these people in here to change the demographics and change the voting blocks or whatever. And then he can say, well, I closed the border. Well, okay, why was it open in the first place? It's like, did they set it up just to give him one talking point to use while he demolishes all the other things he ran on? Wouldn't surprise me. I don't know. I don't have any information to back that up. I'm just reading the room. My most visceral disappointment has been going to war with Iran. Because we went for Israel. We didn't go for us. There's absolutely no reason that we need to go to war with Iran. We can watch 30 years worth of video of Bibi Netanyahu saying that Iran is 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear bomb. Why do we keep falling for it? Why are we listening to these talking points and being afraid of the things that they're telling us when they clearly never happen? I'm starting to think it's really the same thing with China. So watching us go to war for another country, get no benefit from it, be hurt by it with our economy, and Trump abandoning all the financial incentives that we had to elect him on. He doesn't even think about the financial situation of American families anymore. He said that on camera. Tells me that we are politically occupied, okay? Israel just bought a random Congress House seat in Kentucky. Why would they care about that? Because that guy was the only one who was actually still working for the people, not taking a dime from Israel in lobbying money or campaign funds, and demanding the full release of the JE files. He was one of the only people even still talking about it. He and a Democrat are the only two reasons that we got any of them. But now he's gone because AIPAC and other influential Israeli PACs and rich people who live here can just donate millions and millions of dollars to convince these people who have all these mail-in ballots or whatever to elect this completely unknown guy who's going to do their bidding in Congress and get rid of the only guy in there who's doing what we need him to do. So we are politically occupied. And not only that, but we're becoming the bad guys. Remember learning about the bad guys in the history books? Did any of them send 2 separate Tomahawk missiles into a girls' school and kill 165 kids on the first few days of a war? And then deny it and not even apologize or anything? I don't really know what to do with that. He campaigned on no more foreign wars. They're clearly not good for us. They're only good for the people who make money off of them. They're more than happy to send American sons and daughters overseas to die for whatever, more money in their pocket. Until we have an end to lobbying in this country, these problems are going to persist. There's no way that they will ever stop because it's all about money. And a side note, there are more tentacles to learn about with these things. If you look into false flags, the ones that like are very obvious, false flag operations, if you look at the history of why we've gotten into like every war from World War I on, maybe in the Civil War, I'm not sure. And if you are wondering why the government of Israel is so evil, maybe check into the synagogue of Satan that Jesus talked about. Very interesting rabbit hole. Just getting in there myself. And I have a caveat talking about these wars. I am not talking about soldiers and the men and women who actually sign up to join the military. I support them always, especially I know a lot of people who have been in the military or who are in the military, and those are good people. They're some of the best people we have, signing up to go do what they think is right and do the job that not a lot of other people want to do. But that's what makes me even angrier about it, is because these elites have no problem sending our best people over to die so that somebody can make money or just have more political power. Next up for disappointments of the Trump administration is the JE files. Remember how we talked about how justice is blind? Right, unless, I guess, they're using the criminals to benefit the elites with human transportation, blackmail schemes. Sure seems like all of these elites are pretty far above the law and they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, no consequences, don't even need to worry about it. Speaking of, do you guys know about Palm Beach Pete? Talk about above the law. Anyway, Trump ran on releasing the JE files because he knew that it was very important to people. And then, like, halfway through his first year, he was like, "You're still talking about those files?" And then he said, "I don't want support from my base if they still care about those files." Okay, done. Don't need my support, for sure. Again, I voted for principles, not a man. I am not in a cult. And that is the good news. Okay, that, remember, for this is hopefully ever after. I have good news. I have hope for you. None of us are in a cult. And since we're not in a cult, that means we can work together and we can be friends. Doesn't that feel good? It's been a long time since that has been the case. They are always telling us that we need to hate each other. And if you think this way about the world, or I think that way about the world, then we can't be friends. And that is not true. It is beyond time for people in this country, in the world, to get out of these left and right bubbles that we've been in. They are fake. They are created by the mainstream news networks and the paid protests that are organized by activist agencies that actually pay people to come in and protest things and give the illusion on the mainstream news that there's this whole humongous group of people that cares about this thing so much that they'll come out and riot and destroy things on behalf of this idea. When in reality, all of these news networks are owned by about 6 companies total. And they cover the things that are going to sell rage against your neighbor. They're selling a product. And it's not the pharma products that they shill all day long either. Do you ever watch TV during the day, like the news during the day? It's crazy. All of their ad money comes from big pharma. That should also be illegal. Do you know that only the US and North Korea are allowed to advertise pharmaceuticals on TV? I think it's North Korea. There's only 2. We're one of them. The product they're selling is division. They're selling division, distrust for your neighbor, disgust for your neighbor. Okay. They don't want us to be disgusted at the elites who are running this place. They want us to be disgusted with someone who is basically in our exact same life situation, but just thinks differently than we do. And they want to sell paranoia against your neighbor. They want to make us completely paranoid of anyone who thinks differently, so much so that we can't even have conversations anymore. Okay, the journalists, putting in quotes if you're just listening, the journalists at these media networks are not digging for the truth. They're not doing investigative journalism that's going to bring you the truth about any story so that you can be an informed and active citizen. And with the prolific independent journalists we have, like actual alternative media, people who are just firing up a camera from their basement, with all those people that we have now, all these independent media sources, there is absolutely no reason at all to turn on Fox News or CNN or whatever. They have nothing to offer you. That said, you also have to be careful of the independent sources because this market has become so big that they've infiltrated it. And they have people out here that are just out for talking points and to push narratives. If you have X, it can be fascinating to watch 50, 100 tweets come out from a group of people. They're basically all the same. Not exactly the same. They change them a little bit, but it's the exact same message at the same time. It happened the night of the White House press corps dinner shooting or whatever. It happened that night. A bunch of people came out at the same time and said, "This is why we need a ballroom." And it's like, really? Why would we need a ballroom because of this thwarted attack? Because this particular dinner that this happened at is too big to even be held in the ballroom that's being built. So that makes no sense. Yet 100 people come out with the exact same message about it. Do you think that's organic, or do you think they got talking points from someone higher up than them, even though they appear to be independent people on X? So you have to be careful there too, because there are some people there who are just there to make a buck. But the medium of internet podcasting does force more honesty from a host than a regular news source. There's no polished productions usually. And it's honestly hard. I imagine, I can't fake my personality, so I don't know, but I imagine that it would be very difficult to fake your whole personality while you're, talking on a podcast for like 3 hours at a time. I watch Coach Colin, and he always says that at the 3-hour mark, you really get to figure out who that person is because you just can't fake it for longer than that. So, especially people, I guess, who do long form, you get to know them a lot better. But I've personally become much more discerning of who I'm spending my time listening to. And I look for certain things when I'm trying to figure out, like, can I trust this person? Because I don't trust anyone, basically. Maybe I shouldn't say I don't trust anyone, but I'm no longer surprised when I hear something terrible about someone that I did previously trust. So maybe, I don't know if that's like a different level of that, but either way, I'm just more discerning because you can't just assume that people are independent, even if they seem like they are, especially if they're an evangelical influencer or like a pastor on the internet. The Charlie Kirk investigation has unearthed a lot of infiltration by Israel into these groups and into churches. They are actually, like, you can look this up, they are actually partnering with churches, Israel is, to be allowed to geofence the congregations of these churches when they go to their services, and then target these people with pro-Israel propaganda so that they can continue to sway the evangelical opinion of them in the US so that they can continue along with their atrocity schedule as planned. That is nuts to me. That's a whole different topic. I don't know if I'll ever have time to get into that, but it's very interesting and terrifying. But again, different topic. They also bring pastors and our freshman Congress people, like their first year in Congress. Israel brings these people on free trips to Israel so that they can show them the Holy Land, get their little Christian hearts all excited, and talk about how great Israel is so that when they come back here to influence people, influence their congregations, make decisions and vote on things in Congress, that Israel is always the good guy in their mind. How sick is that? So again, different topic. But anyway, when I'm looking for who am I going to get my news from? Personally, I'm pretty much ruling out anyone who is attached to a big network, even a local news network, if you're covering something that is more national. Like if you're not talking about, some like ice cream festival that happened in your town and you're a local news network trying to give me national news. I know about CIA Project Mockingbird. I've seen the video of all the local hosts parroting the exact same script as other local hosts all across the country. So I know about that. So you're not hoodwinking me on that anymore. And after you recognize this propaganda, like when you can recognize it in real time, it makes these shows completely obnoxious and like totally unwatchable. I cannot stand it anymore, especially the hosts who are rage baiters. Like if you have ever listened to Mark Levin, my gosh, it is so like I can't even describe how awful it is to listen to that guy. Everything he says is aimed at low IQ voters, not even people who don't know about politics, but just people who are low IQ, like who cannot hear someone trying so desperately to convince you to hate somebody else that anything he says is for shock value. He's yelling at you all the time. And he just wants people to get mad at other people because they vote differently from them. Not even vote differently, but like his thing is Israel, okay? He only wants to get mad at people who are not up Israel's butt like he is. And he's always mad at people, like he's always attacking people and he's always using strawman arguments. And once you can recognize those things, it's completely unwatchable. So I watch a lot of people now. I keep up with some really good ones, and you know them by their fruits. Okay, we talk about this every episode, I think. If they are someone who's humble, who admits to mistakes in previous reporting, everybody that I listen to has come at one time or another and said, hey, I previously said this, then found this out, so I'm correcting the record. And they're happy to do that. So they're admitting to mistakes. They're admitting when they don't know something. They're saying, hey, I found this. I'm not sure what it means. It might be important. It might be nothing, but I just want to find out more. It's been a lot of crowdsourcing for information, which I think is amazing because everything is always given to us in the mainstream news. Like it's always just packaged up with a pretty little bow and they say, this is the story. This is what happened. Here you go. And that is just not the case. That's not ever true because they never give you the full information. It's always with a veil on it or with a complete spin, or it's not true at all. They just want you to think a certain way. But my favorite people are speaking to facts, speaking to specific claims from other people. They're not assassinating people's characters. They might make fun of them a little bit for this or that, but it's all in good fun, right? They're not assassinating their character. They're not saying they're a bad person because they think this way. And they're not using straw man arguments. So if they're doing all those things, I feel like I can have a pretty good idea that they're a trustworthy source. But I do stay pretty vigilant now. And I really try to separate my emotion from what I'm hearing. And I like that practice because that used to be the reason that I wanted to listen to some people, because I wanted that emotion. I wanted to be mad at somebody or like mad at the system or the world or whatever. But now I really just want the information, and I would like the opportunity to critically think about it and consider, do I believe all of that? Do I believe some of it? What is making sense to me? What else does this explain for me or lead me to look into? I think that's how it should be done. So if we can break these bubbles and see beyond the talking points, you can tell that talking points really annoy me because they're not the truth. They're always aimed at an agenda and like trying to push you towards a conclusion. and realize that very little information is being presented to us. We're not ever getting the full story. You should not ever trust that a news source is giving you the full story. If we can realize all of these things, I think we can actually come together again. Because yes, we all have different ideas about how to make the world better. And there are still issues that I still believe are purely right and wrong. Like, you're not going to convince me that abortion is okay, ever, no matter what stage of pregnancy it is, no matter what the circumstances of conception were. Like, I always believe that it's wrong. So, like, we can fight about that, I guess, but what is it going to change? Like, unless somebody is actually interested in why you think something, or you're interested in why they think something, you're not going to hear them. You're just arguing, you're just talking at each other. And to me, at this point, that's a waste of time. But the possibilities for us to thrive as a society are not only limited to two sides. Okay, this is not a left and right problem. One thing that diving into conspiracies over the past few years has taught me is that the world is so much bigger and more complex than we thought. And history is so much more complex than I ever thought. What we are taught in school is the very smallest glimpse of what has actually happened. We know nothing of what our scientists have not uncovered or decoded thus far in this huge earth, who funded the research of any of the archaeological finds that we have, and who decided what was true or what was worthy of being published. What went on in secret meetings behind closed doors that led up to these wars or these historical events that made it into our history books? And who benefited from them? Jekyll Island comes to mind, and the Titanic. That story comes to mind when I think about that. Who funded these wars that we learn about? Did they fund one side, or did they fund both sides? That one will blow your mind. Who are the dynasties of these families who are involved in all of these things? Because they are generational players. Okay, they've been doing this for a long time. They never talk about the religious practices of the people who are the big world players. What is driving the people who are remaking the world over and over again? We don't talk about that. We say, hey, memorize these dates and memorize this geography. Check, you passed history. Good job. And we have an abundance of physical evidence that completely conflicts with the accepted narratives of civilization. There are Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. How's that possible? There are ancient stone carvings in the New England area and temples that match the same types of carvings and temples that are in Europe from the same time period, and this was way before Columbus. How? There are inexplicable structures all over the world. Stonehenge, the pyramids, mathematically and seasonally precise temples and monuments all around the world that history tells us that the tech that went into these should not have been possible for these civilizations. So how did they do it? And how do we not know yet? And how do we not have the technology now to build the things that they built back then? And how are a lot of them built on ley lines that go all across the world if there was no mode of transportation that took people all across the world when they were built? Why are there news stories in newspapers about bones of giants being found all over the US, but only up until the 1800s? And why do people say that the Smithsonian was coming to confiscate these bones when they were found? And then you call the Smithsonian and ask about them, and they say, we don't know what you're talking about, or we lost them. Why? Why was all of Tesla's work confiscated after he died by the government? Wasn't that like Donald Trump's great uncle or someone who was an FBI agent at the time who went in and got that stuff? I'm pretty sure that's true. But all his work was confiscated. He was working on free energy that came from the earth that everybody could tap into. So why don't we have that? The list goes on and on and on and on. Cosmologists don't understand the universe. They have said that 95% of the universe is a mystery to them, yet we act like they are the end all be all of the knowledge, and we're going to try to prove that God isn't real by the things that they say about the universe. But they only understand 5% of it. So I'm like, why am I listening to you? My point is that information filters down to us by official channels, and it is highly, highly processed and propagandized and sanitized to serve an agenda of keeping us in these tiny little boxes of knowledge. I think they want to keep us from knowing who we are, knowing what we are, knowing how we connect to nature. You know, if you can restart a heart with electricity, then that means that I'm an electrical being. I know that I can conduct electricity. And if the earth has an electrical charge on it, then why is grounding weird? God said that he works all things for our good. And that doesn't just mean things that happen in your life. That means the earth that he made for us. Our home, the place where we live. And that means all things. So we have all of these man-made technologies to keep us well, yet we are now the sickest that we've ever been. Our kids are the sickest that kids on earth have ever been. And natural remedies are still looked at like they're crazy. And the idea that you don't want to pump a newborn person with synthetic medicines that come in syringes and shots is crazy, because they design the system that way, because they can't make money if you are using a dandelion root to heal something in your body and not going to a doctor and getting a petroleum-based pharmaceutical, stuff like that. And we're also not taught about spiritual sickness. I just started listening again. I love the Exorcist Files podcast, and it's been a while since I listened, but I did today. And I was just reminded of how easily so many people are falling into a trap of being oppressed by demonic forces. And we don't even think about it, because the doors that these demons use to get into people's lives and attach themselves to them are things that we've normalized. The one I listened to today was a lady who did a tarot reading when she was in New Orleans on vacation. And she was like possessed by a demon immediately. And people think that's nuts. They think that is a crazy thing to say, but I have absolutely no problem saying it. I think that we should be informed about these things. If you want to know more about that, you can just Google the Catechism of the Catholic Church. There's a whole paragraph on why these things are bad. Like, we're not just going to say, don't do it. We're going to say, hey, this is dangerous because of these reasons. So you can go read that. But anyway, yeah, we don't talk about spiritual sickness, and there's a lot of people suffering from it that don't know it. They think it's something physical or mental, and it's not. It's spiritual. So to give a good example of these things, about this information that doesn't filter down to us because of some agenda, I read a book last year called America, BC, and it was talking about real archaeological findings in America from BC, from the before Christ era. And in the US, when they teach us history, they pretty much start with Columbus. Like, we don't get a lot before that. It's like Columbus came and, all of these people were already living here, these Native Americans. But then we just talk about how, everybody was cruel to them, and not, we should. But that's not where our history starts for real. But that's how we're taught. So that's kind of how we think about it. But the people who are making these archaeological finds in the US found it impossible to get their findings published, because that contradicted the narrative that's already out there about the beginning of the US. And that concept blew my mind until I remembered that I lived through COVID, and I watched in real time as real legitimate doctors and researchers were coming out in public saying, this product that is being mandated for everyone is very dangerous. And here is the reason why. These are the mechanisms of how it works in the body. These are the bad effects it's going to cause for people. And then it really started causing that for people. And there were real reported cases. And there were enough of them that should have scared people into not getting them. And the mainstream news just completely ignored all of those warnings. They were still telling everyone to get them, including pregnant women and children. And I will never, ever forget that in my life. If you cannot tell, I am so angry about that still. I wonder how many people lost babies because of that. I wonder if we'll ever know. But has anyone gone to jail? No, they have not. There have been zero consequences for those decisions and actions. So anyway, I remember that I lived through that era. And then I was like, oh yeah, same thing. It goes against the narrative. So that means that even when real evidence comes out, we ignore it and we demonize the people who bring it forward, and we try to ruin their careers and make them defend their licenses. And even if they're the most published cardiologist in the world, who's coming out and telling us that this is bad for a human heart? Even then. So, do I trust the science anymore, you might ask? No. Unless you can show me a real study about something that is not suppressed with the safe and effective slogan that has been so, that's been effective. That slogan has been effective. But also, do I believe that the billions and maybe trillions of dollars that have gone into research for cancer and other diseases that kill people all the time, do I think they're going to find a cure with all those dollars? Do I think they want a cure? Do they want a cure that's going to end their gravy train of research funding and grant money and medications and treatments and other products that are keeping this industry going? I'll let you guess. Can you think of the last time that you saw a government or a huge corporation put people over profits? Because I can't. So we are all on the same side, and we can all ignore all of this fake propaganda that comes out all the time for every issue, and we can focus on the principles that are going to benefit all of us as we continue to resist the imminent digital mass surveillance totalitarian robot state that's coming. They need us to be divided to win. And that's why they spend so much time and money on it. If they didn't need that, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't fabricate this constant war between people. They wouldn't spend all this money on these political theater shows that we all witness every election cycle. They would just shut us down. But they can't unless we are completely divided, and they can get us to destroy each other. I think a lot of people in my life will be surprised to hear that I have turned over a new leaf and being, willing to reach across the aisle. When I started to learn more about what Israel was doing in Gaza, which, by the way, Tucker Carlson introduced to me, I did not have that on my feed forever. I didn't know anything. I knew people were upset about it, but I was not seeing anything myself, so I didn't really understand what was happening. But after Tucker interviewed that guy who was not an aid worker, he was former military who went over there for a contractor job, I was horrified. And I started looking more into it and following these accounts that were showing me things that were happening and getting to the truth on what the government of Israel really is. And I started getting leftist Democrat pages shared to my feed. And I was like, whoa, we're in a totally different world. And oh yeah, none of us are in a cult. We can identify right and wrong, and we can stand up and say which one it is. So right and wrong eventually prevailed in my feed, and right and wrong will eventually prevail in all places through time after all of these evil power grabs are washed away with Christ's return. The truth cannot be killed. It can be suppressed for a time, but it cannot be killed. Sorry to remind you that no one but Jesus is coming to save us. But for now, we're still here. If you're still here, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I have I have a different type of series that I would love to do, a book series, and I would love to practice going live with it. But as I found out, you can't go live unless you have 50 subscribers, which I'm nowhere close to. So if you see this and you liked it at all, please subscribe. That would be great. There's more that I want to be able to do on here. And if we're still here next week, I'll see you then.